Hi, everyone. Welcome and thanks for joining us today. This is Dane DeSimino with Siemplify. I'm happy to kick us off here today for today's joint webinar between Siemplify and Netskope on automating response to cloud security alerts. This is a very relevant topic considering the recent increase in remote work, so we're glad that you tuned in. Our speakers today are David Willis, Technology Alliances Director from Netskope, as well as Mike Gibbons, Customer Success Manager from Siemplify. So in terms of agenda, we'll start with a quick overview of the Siemplify platform, which I'll take you through in just a minute. And then I'm going to hand off to David, who is going to go over Netskope and their security cloud platform, along with a bunch of other details. David is going to then hand off to Mike, who's going to go through a demonstration of our joint use case. Finally, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to use the Zoom Q&A feature, and we'll be sure to answer those during or at the end of the webinar. We're going to have a dedicated Q&A session. So a little about Siemplify. Siemplify was founded in 2015. Since then has been working on solving really the most challenging problems that security operations teams face. You have the tool explosion, the manual processes issues, talent shortage, the alert overload, and you've heard of all of these before, but really the lack of a single platform is probably the key challenge here. Other functions, if you look around, your own business or organization like sales or HR have single platforms. You look at like Salesforce or Workday, but if you've ever been inside of a SOC, it's very clear that this doesn't exist in security operations. It's typical to see analysts constantly swivel between multiple products that are firing off alerts in 1,000 directions. And this obviously impacts productivity and also makes it difficult to get visibility, drive improvements, and understand what cases analysts are really focused on. So as a result of this, this critical need over the years, Siemplify has built an independent end-to-end security operations platform. We're entirely focused on product innovation and partnering with the broader security ecosystem. The cloud-native platform enables SecOps teams at enterprises and MSSPs because of our multi-tenancy feature with a single workbench to manage all activities from. You can orchestrate the tools that you've invested in and create automated playbooks that dramatically reduce your response times. The platform has a threat-centric case management area that groups alerts and investigations, and also has a command center for escalating any crisis scenarios. So with this platform, your team spends more time on higher value work as opposed to repetitive and mundane activities. And all this, combines to effectively allow you to respond to alerts at scale, address the alert overload issues that we talked about, the talent shortage, and drive more effectiveness and efficiency over time because you can measure everything, using KPIs and metrics with our business intelligence feature as well. So we're also proud to partner with most of the vendors in your technology stack. We have over 200 technology integrations. Today's discussion is going to focus on our Netskope alliance, which is very important. And, we want to talk more about how we're partnering with Netskope to deliver a joint solution that can help you automate responses to, your Netskope alerts alongside your entire stack. And so without, delaying our experts any longer here, that I just wanted to give that quick overview of Siemplify, our platform, and kind of the premise for the webinar. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to David. So David, if you're able, just take over the screen and go to the next one.
You bet. All right.
All right, approved. You're good.
All right. So thank you all very much. Excited to be back here with Siemplify. Netskope has been around since 2012, and we originally were built as a CASB-only platform that has subsequently grown to include many additional functions, including, let's try that again, including public cloud security, next-gen secure web gateway, and private access with our Zero Trust Network Access client. We're in most of the Fortune 100. We're growing at a very rapid pace, even before the crazy situation that we're all finding ourselves in. We handle billions of transactions, and our goal is to build a network, and we're already largely built out, that will basically deliver a secure access to the internet with less than 20 milliseconds of end-to-end performance delay. There are thousands, literally tens of thousands of applications that Netskope can safely enable. And that's really important because, frankly, people are going to use the cloud. Increasingly, people are going to cloud for applications that are required to perform business functions. So you can't just turn it off, you have to safely enable it. And doing all of this with some really world-class tools like DLP and threat protection and prevention has meant that we've been a Gartner leader quite a few times. Here we go. Just having some delays here with the screen, so sorry everyone. Okay. So the Netskope Security Cloud is actually a collection of microservices that are built to service multiple architectures and multiple use cases. We've already mentioned the various areas that we work in. We do this with a single console, and we're able to create policies that are able to leverage multiple microservices at the same time in order to deliver really an unparalleled view and control over direct-to-internet transactions. This manifests itself ultimately as a very rich data set with lots of context around the activities that are being engaged in, either malicious or productive. And this is augmented further by our threat research teams and, of course, runs over this globally performant new edge cloud. Now, we can't do everything. We're in the cloud. We can't see other systems necessarily natively. And we can't take advantage of all of this rich data, but our partners can. When it comes to leveraging that information in third-party resources like endpoints. So we have a very rich third-party integration ecosystem, including EDR vendors, SIEM vendors, and SOAR vendors like Siemplify. Now, one of the things that makes our integration with Siemplify so exciting is instead of just ingesting our data, which can be very, very helpful in creating more protected and performant IT and security stacks, Siemplify is actually able to gather up information, parse it out, and then turn around and take actions inside Netskope. So they are truly leveraging the SOAR piece of the orchestration story to actually make sure that Netskope is able to take preventative action or responsive action based on the information that Siemplify is correlated with our data and with the data provided by third parties. So why is this so important? And I think, you know, the fact that Netskope has all of these functions that are ultimately running through Netskope, the Netskope Security Cloud in real time, has ultimately meant that our cloud proxy architecture, which is an inline architecture for the vast majority of our customers, is seeing the vast majority of traffic. What is interesting is that as the IT complex becomes more and more hybridized, in other words, more and more applications and platforms are running in the cloud, we're seeing a huge amount of data that is only partially on the web. Essentially, there's this evolution as traffic starts off with a website and then manifests itself and evolves into a fully SaaS functional service. That area continues to grow while web basically diminishes because sites become richer and richer. We're also seeing IaaS traffic, which is starting to grow but is still relatively in its infancy. But the fact is that all of this is growing at a rapid rate. Something like 70% of America's workforce is now working remotely, and so they're not able to access these services through a traditional perimeter. Having Netskope be able to work with its proxy architecture and bring this traffic back through a security cloud enables us to see all of these different kinds of transactions, securely enable them, and of course, ultimately provide the information around these transactions to Siemplify. So let's just talk through what this context means. I've mentioned it a few times. In this case, I'm going to talk through a particular combination of services and features, including CASB, Secure Web Gateway, and leveraging our enterprise-grade data leakage prevention engine. So we've got Pat Smith in accounting, and she is on a managed device or potentially at the same time on her personal iPad or tablet or phone. And in this case, Pat is accessing a Box instance, and we're able to determine if the instance is her own or the corporate instance, and that instance awareness is going to be very important for making sure that data doesn't exfiltrate from a managed instance to an unmanaged instance. We are also going to be able to rate the safety, the cloud confidence of that application, and this includes a wide variety of factors that enable us to basically help customers to understand, you know, how dangerous is it to put data into this cloud and to work with this cloud. Once you put the data in, is it even your data anymore? And then, of course, is that data going to be protected for compliance with a wide variety of privacy and confidentiality concerns? We'll also look for the URL category. In this case, Box is a file sharing category. There's over 100 categories, and we continue to add to that as well as to streamline and optimize our data set. And then we're looking for activities. So what is Pat actually doing with Box now that we verify that she is going to Box? So is she uploading a file? Is she downloading it? Is she sharing it? Is she viewing it? All of these have a greater or lesser risk to the enterprise. Is there a threat embedded in those activities? And then what is the content of that data? So is the information that's being shared in Box or being shared through Box ultimately containing information that, yes, is safe from a malicious perspective, but maybe it is violating corporate confidentiality requirements? And then after we have all of this information, we're going to decide what we're going to do with this. Now, today you're going to see how Siemplify is been able to create a truly powerful DLP defragmentation dashboard that is leveraging all of this information that Netskope is providing and correlating it across other components in the company stack. This will enable us to have a more nuanced approach to whether or not we allow a DLP incident to go through, whether or not it's a false positive, whether or not it needs to be then returned back to use and taken out of, for example, legal hold or quarantine. And these are all very important parts of closing out the loop on a potential incident and understanding what is happening with the files. Because again, Netskope is in the cloud. We don't necessarily see all transactions that are occurring across the enterprise or from devices. The hope is that Netskope does see most of it, but the fact is we're still dealing with a very hybrid environment. So all of this information is very, very important to the security incident investigator to better understand what is happening and then decide what to take action on inside Siemplify. So now we know that Pat from accounting is using a personal Box instance. We're doing the DLP check. We potentially might coach if Pat is actually engaging in some dangerous behavior, but it is allowed. We can also determine if she's on a desktop uploading files, and if she's uploading files, we can check for malware or threats. We can determine if Pat is on a mobile device using a company Box instance to download files, and if that's the case, we can take further action to only allow Pat to view those files, but not to actually download them to a personal BYOD device. We could take it a step further and say, you know, Pat's on their laptop and they're browsing these gambling sites. Maybe we block it, maybe we coach it, maybe we create a user alert, and again, that user alert can be used to potentially move Pat into a different policy. So all of this is very, very powerful and gives you the kinds of information that's required to understand modern threats, modern exfiltration vectors, and the sort of the overall posture of the company, and to continue to fine tune it. I'm excited to hand it over to Mike, because Mike is going to show you the sorts of power that Siemplify is applying to leverage all of this information and context to correlate it to multiple systems and then to take action inside Netskope as well as these other systems by leveraging their quite powerful SOAR engine. So Pat, it's all yours.
Hey, thanks, David. I'm Mike Gibbons. I'm one of the CSMs here at Siemplify. Like David and Dane said, I'll be running you guys through the demo here. So thank you all very much for tuning in today. Really exciting, some cool stuff. It's a lot of fun to build this stuff out, present it, and really see what we can do here with the automation piece. So let me go ahead and share out my screen here. Can everybody see this over here okay? We're good. Okay, so and also really quick, I kind of want to highlight on a couple of higher level things, kind of bridging off what Dane was saying before about SOAR and kind of how we approach SOAR here at Siemplify. So, all SOAR platforms are made of, drag and drop playbooks, which allows for automation by running numerous scripts, Python in the back end, accessing your security tools, APIs, making your SOC faster, right? But one of the big problems is, providing the correlation and the context that's really crucial to properly defining and responding to an incident, kind of tying everything together, as David was saying before. So automation is very important, but you really need to understand the relationship between the alerts and the entities. And an average SOAR product gets an alert, for example, whether it be like phishing, malware detected, DLP, of numerous types, firewalls, but it might not see the relationship between the alerts to easily derive the context. It's somewhat of a siloed process. You have a couple of alerts that come in that are actually linked, but these alerts might be assigned to 2 or 3 different analysts, and you can come to the same conclusion in the end, but it really does kind of take a different level of skill, and it also takes a different level, more time to do this, which is one of the things that we do really well, is how we kind of bring this in, we group it together, and as you can see here, we also visualize this data, so it's really easy to digest. I'm not saying analysts can't do it without it, but it definitely increases the difficulty in doing so, and subsequently increases the overall time to remediate the incident. And before this, my previous life, I was an analyst, focusing on cyber threat intel, cybercrime, fraud, money laundering, and like many of you on here, we've all spent our fair share of weeks and months, looking at raw data, trying to derive the relationship and the context between, certain data points, right? Like, what does it mean? What time did it interact with this? How did it interact with it? Who touched it, et cetera, right? It's tedious work and it drags on. And when you're forced to manually connect the dots, it can be a little painful, and Siemplify does a really good job at kind of breaking down those silos, which is really, really beneficial to the analyst. So, that's kind of how we do it. We drive a lot of context based on a threat-centric approach. And the platform itself is very analyst friendly, really easy playbook creation, drag and drop, easy playbook management, permissions configuration, etc. So I kind of wanted to highlight on a little bit of that before, but now we're going to go ahead and jump into the case here. So I want you guys to kind of approach this, as an analyst would in the platform, right? You're a tier 1, 1.5, 2 guy. So put yourself in the analyst seat. And when you receive a case like this coming in, you want to know a couple of things initially, right? And anyone working in security wants to know what happened, when did it happen, where did this happen? Especially if you're, a multinational corporation spread across the world, which office, who was involved, why did this happen, and how did this happen? Although, the how and the why might not be derived till later, that's ultimately what you're shooting for here. Trying to answer those as quickly as possible in the easiest to digest way. So here in this case, we have, an alert, DLP, cloud storage upload is the alert here in this case. And a few things jump out at you right away. You can see the case name, you can see the alert, you can see the overall criticality based on the color here. We have numerous different ones that are assigned to it. So the thresholding for criticality is kind of set based on a combination of all the information in here, where this kind of differs a little bit from some other tools, like SIMS specifically, where to assign criticality is more based on the specific alert itself, not the entire incident at play. So for DLP, for example, something like a restricted file access is one thing, but when you combine that with an unauthorized file upload, or something, of similar severity, the overall criticality of the case is going to increase, right? So you have someone assessing something they shouldn't be, or accessing something they shouldn't be, now it's leaving the organization in that one, right? That's a big no-no. That's not what we want to see. So that's going to be a very, very high criticality on a case. So this right here allows you to see stuff like that. And to visualize our data and findings, we have what we call insights, which you can see displayed here. And these are the information that's derived from the case and the integrations pulled in from our products API. And they're very brief, concise snapshots of important information that needs to be displayed here, as you can see, which makes it really easy for an analyst to digest right off the bat. And these are also kind of flexible, so you can kind of decide what you want displayed as an insight. You can control the amount of information your analysts are seeing, essentially, to either not overwhelm them, or if they want more, you can give them more. It provides you that flexibility, which is really great too. So looking at this, one of the first things we want to do is bring in as much context as we can, which is what we call enrichment in our playbook. We can see the steps here initially. And this is just going to pull in everything we can from the tools in this playbook, right? And we automate this. So in this instance, what we have is, Netskope, our cloud access security broker, CASB, kicking off an alert, cloud storage upload. And then you can see here, we're bringing in our Active Directory. We're bringing in our EDR. In this case, it's Carbon Black Response. We're even using our ticketing system here as well, ServiceNow. So we can see all this information amalgamated together really quick. And Netskope is obviously functioning as the central point for data in the cloud in this one. And here it's providing visibility into all cloud programs, apps, files, data, as David highlighted before. And it's also providing where all this is coming from and where it's going. So Netskope has the ability to really search endpoints, and pivot around other tools in the stack, to search for things like a hash, a file. We can see IPs, which can be incredibly powerful in how it allows us to leverage the playbook's logic here for this enrichment and subsequent remediation on this case. So initially here, we use the IPs provided by Netskope to locate the specific host machine. And when we do this, you can kind of see, highlight this a little better. You can see here, we get a snapshot of an internal IP, a machine here, a user. We have an external IP. We have a URL. We have a file hash, and we have an actual file itself. So we're able to use this to pivot around those, like I said. So we're able to see from that IP, reach out to our EDR and say, okay, who's actually, what machine is this here? And we're able to see, okay, this is actually this machine here, Windows 10 version 1903, the host name, LTG Belson. And then we're able to use that information automatically via the logic in the playbook and pivot and enrich it from Active Directory, which is then going to give us this right here, who the actual user is, which is also really important too, because you want to know just that, right? Like, who is this person? Where are they located? What are the permissions that they have, etc. And in this case, it's an HR role based in New York City. This is the user associated with it. And one of the other things we were able to do is, now that we know the user and we know the actual host machine, we're also able to take in and also pull in some more information from it in our enrichment, right? Let's pull in all the processes from this thing right here that we can. So, we're searching for potentially unwanted programs that are active. And here we can see we have TeamViewer and an RDP session, which is suspicious and could possibly be malicious, especially given the greater context and the correlation around the file upload to Dropbox. So given these insights right away, we can kind of see things that are now easily digestible and provide good context as to what's happening, the initial actions that we also took, which we can also see here. So kind of like shifting to that scope now. So we found out what it is. Now we took action via our playbook, right? So one of the first things in this case, what we would want to do possibly is we want to block the hash, which is for the hash for the file that was uploaded. We're not necessarily blocking it because it's a malicious hash. Here we can see it's green, which means it's not malicious, but because we don't really want other users uploading it or interacting with that file, while we're conducting our investigation on this. And so we were able to use Netskope to take action against that by blocking that hash. And we also reached out to the EDR tool as well and did it on the endpoint. Kind of a little more redundant maybe based on your processes or whatever, but this is the flexibility that it allows. So then one of the things we were able to do is we were also able to take this and we were able to isolate the endpoint here using Carbon Black Response. So we cut all traffic off from it. And then you can also see here the playbook automatically went and opened up a ServiceNow ticket directing IT, hey, this is what happened, this is the time, everything. We need you to go ahead and go ahead and pull that device. So the whole goal for the way that we did this was bringing the information in, really leveraging it as fast as we could, visualizing this data really well to apply the proper risk mitigation steps in the end, which we did here. And something else you could possibly do is, if you wanted to, you could disable the user's Active Directory account, or you could actually reach out and kill the processes if you wanted to. It all really just depends on kind of what your company policies are. These are incredibly flexible in how you can build this logic and you can then action it. And kind of one of the other things that I want to show too is what we call our grouping. And it really provides a good visual for a case, kind of in a different way than the insights. So this is a live graphical representation of the common entities and artifacts, as we call them, which is kind of visualized by this web that you can see here. So like really briefly, an entity is something a little more dynamic, like a user or a host machine, something doing something, whereas an artifact is something a little more static, like a file or a hash, if you will. And this is live, like I said, so this is updating as the incident goes on. So if another alert is kicked off and it has this associated user or this file hash, this IP, etc., it's going to then populate this information as the incident is ongoing and the case is open. And it's also displayed in chronological order. You can see here it's time-stamped based on when it was ingested into the system, etc. So you can really kind of see the timeline here, when it occurred, etc., which provides some really good context too. Here you can see 3/24/26 is when this alert was kicked off and all this information was then brought into it. And grouping, this really makes it easy too for junior analysts to see the reaction between the alerts and the entities and artifacts. And it's color coded, which is also really helpful too. So red is something malicious that we know malicious via our threat intelligence engines that come in and say, yeah, this is flagged as malicious, this would be red, for example. Here it's green because it wasn't flagged necessarily as malicious. Solidly filled means it's internal to the organization. So this is an internal user, internal machine. And hollow lets you know that it's external. So, Dropbox, obviously external URL. This is the IP associated with it, etc. And kind of one of the cool things here too is, if you wanted to, you could actually take action from this page. If the logic in the playbook wanted you to take manual action, you could do so. You can click on the actual entity or artifact. And when you come over here, one of the things you could do is actually click the tools that are available, and you can say, you know what, I actually want to isolate this host. Click on that, you can hit execute, and it'll do it from here, or unisolate, vice versa. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the way the information is ingested. Using something like Netskope, the power that provides by the information it provides, and how we can tie the whole our whole security stack together and leverage it with whatever internal process you bring into a playbook. And kind of one last thing to highlight on too is our case wall here. And this is essentially a chronological order of everything that happened with this case from the time the alert was ingested into Siemplify, all the enrichment that was performed, the actions that were that took place, the results from those actions, etc. So start to finish, this is an actual log of everything that happened to that case, the analyst that was on it, and what they did for it. So kind of start to finish, this is essentially kind of a really cool way to really come in and remediate, DLP incident, leveraging Netskope, EDR, Active Directory and ServiceNow, and a couple others internally. Dane, I think that's pretty much everything I had on my end from the demo. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it back over to you.
Great, thanks, Mike. Yeah, we're going to start question and answer. So if you haven't already, if you have a question, feel free to open up the Q&A, and I will sort through and begin to ask the questions as I share here. Okay. So we got a few coming in. First one, Mike, this might go back to you here about adoption of automation. So are customers actually adopting automation, and to what extent? What is the most reasonable approach to deciding what to automate? It's a good one. What are your thoughts there, Mike?
Yeah, that's actually a great question. I mean, I've implemented Siemplify at over 20 different enterprises, MSSPs across the world. And that's kind of a common question is, like, we need to work through this thing. Like, where do we start with this, right? And it really just depends on the organization specifically, and kind of what is kind of giving you guys the most headache. What's the most volume of alerts coming in on a daily basis, a weekly basis? For some, it's something as trivial as just like a lot of phishing alerts, things bouncing off the firewalls, or a lot of scanning alerts coming in, depending on if you're a larger manufacturing company, et cetera. So I always tell them to start with whatever is taking up the most of your time, eating up a lot of your analyst time. Start there, right? And you really have the processes already created for how you do this, like what your analysts are doing manually. So essentially just take those steps, and we bring it into our system and adopt our terminology and our logic for it in our playbooks. And then you can start to really cut out all of that workflow right there.
Great, thanks, Mike. Okay, so let's see. The next one, David, on CASB. At a high level, you talk about CASB, but is that the limit of the functions being exposed or automated with this integration?
Oh, thanks. Thanks, whoever asked that question. Yeah, no, the reality is that Netskope is a single platform. And so again, even though we started as a CASB, and a lot of our customers use us as a CASB, increasingly customers are leveraging the fact that the platform sits astride all of those direct internet connections. And so it is also acting as a secure web gateway. It's acting as an IaaS, continuous security assessment platform, and it's servicing those zero trust network access requirements to tie into private services if they're on the cloud or on the prem. So all of this data and all of these use cases are actually being protected, and therefore data alerts and events are being compiled around them, which ultimately Siemplify is going to be able to read and then take action on, pivot around. So when we create an event, there's actually going to be all kinds of information around that event, regardless of what architecture is in use, and that is ultimately going to be leveraged by Siemplify.
Great. Thanks, David. This one's a little broader. What can Netskope and Siemplify do together, but not as a standalone?
Mike, I'll try and answer that. I think the most important thing to understand is that Netskope is not all things to all people. In other words, we don't have a view into the entire security stack. We do not do correlation across external solutions and systems. We're not a SIEM. So our ability to see what's happening is only as great as our ability to see the traffic. And if we're not sitting astride that traffic, either inline or with a non-real-time API integration, we are going to have a lack of visibility into what else is going on that could have a material impact on Netskope's enforcement. Let me give you an example. So Siemplify, as you saw in that demo that Mike took you through, is able to work with third-party systems like Carbon Black. And Carbon Black is seeing all kinds of things happening, and Carbon Black is seeing processes get started and stopped, and those processes may be related to malicious activities. Well, Netskope isn't aware of what's happening on the endpoint. We're only aware of what actually gets to the Netskope Security Cloud. So Siemplify is able to see all of those activities that are being driven by components that are outside of Netskope, and then leverage that back into Netskope using the functions that we've exposed for programmatic access and controls to, again, either enhance our threat prevention posture, in this case, the customer's threat prevention posture, or to take other actions because it's such a robust platform to reduce the user who's at risk or the device that's at risk, their access to those cloud components that are more sensitive in the enterprise. Again, Netskope doesn't have necessarily all that context. We have a lot of context, and we can try and figure out what's going on with some of these users and devices, but having Siemplify in the mix that's actually correlating all this is going to be just immensely more useful. And then Netskope is able to leverage that information that Siemplify is doing a good job of compiling and turning into actionable intelligence and commands. So yeah, there's actually a lot that we need Siemplify to do in order to get the very most out of the security stack that the customer has bought across all of their different deployments. I see a couple of questions in the Q&A window. Mike, I think this one's for you. Would automation be based on one event ID? In other words, Windows events, or can it be based on multiple, or must it be based on multiple events?
It can be based on multiple events too. So, I mean, whatever event kicks off an alert, I mean, if there's, what we do is our grouping, essentially, we're looking for commonalities amongst the events that are kicked off, right? So if you do have one that, has a specific user, in this case, like we'll use, G. Belson here, that machine, and then you also had another alert come in 30 minutes later with something else from that same user, given the time that those alerts occurred, it's going to group them together in a case and start to enrich and pull that data and kind of feed off one another to see what's really going on. So, yeah, it's kind of based off the numerous alerts and events coming in like that. And it can be one or it can be numerous, essentially.
I think that answers the question. The other question I saw in the window is, what does a typical proof of concept look like for Siemplify? And then I'll answer the Netskope.
Yes, I mean, a typical POC is obviously going to come in. We're going to allow you to come in and view the product. Help adopt a couple use cases, et cetera, to there, so you guys kind of see how it functions, how it flows, and kind of the real value that this can provide to you guys, right out the box, right away. So, I mean, and they do vary, depending on what it is. And I mean, if you wanted more information on that specifically, we can obviously provide more of that depending.
Okay, and in the case of Netskope, we would typically have a small-scale deployment of inline clients. That's the easiest way to start demonstrating the value of the Netskope platform, is to put some of the steering onto the customer's endpoints, and then that traffic would get routed either in total or selectively to the Netskope Security Cloud for enforcement and visibility. So a POC can be that. It could be also a discovery deployment, which essentially is grabbing logs and trying to determine the extent of your direct-to-internet usage and what is happening with the direct-to-internet usage. So there's different use cases depending upon what it is that you are concerned about. And those POCs typically last for 30 to 45 days. So that hopefully answers that question. Are there any more questions from the audience?
I'm seeing, it looks like we covered them all, and if not, we'll reach out afterwards if they trickle in after. But looks like that does it for this webinar. Again, if we didn't get to your question, we'll reach out. And for reference, if you see on the screen here, there's a link that you can access to learn more about our integration and partnership, and you can even, find a 14-day free trial where there's an out-of-the-box Netskope use case that's just push button and easy to deploy if you're eager to get started here, or try that out for yourself. So that concludes today's webinar. I want to thank David and Mike. You guys provided us with a lot of great insight and information, so thanks a lot for your time here, and thanks to all of you in our audience for tuning in. Have a good one.